I'd like to welcome my guests today. We have fantastic panelists that are going to give us a sense of what's happening in the private sector, what's happening at government level, and of course, importantly, consumer trends. What is happening on the ground, and is the fear factor still very much a reality? I'd like to welcome Ambassador Dr. Pindi, Chana, Minister of Natural Resources and Tourism for Tanzania. Welcome. I've got lots of notes here. I've got Nicolas, Huss, Chief Executive Officer at Hotelbeds. Welcome, sir. Welcome as well to Clayton, Reid, Chief Executive Officer, MMGY as well. And we also have one person missing here, JD O'Hara, Chief Executive Officer, Internova Travel Group. And a very warm welcome to Elena, Kountoura, member of the European Parliament, and also former Tourism Minister of Greece. Welcome to all of you. Great to have you with us. Minister, I'd like to start with you. I think that the first question on everyone's mind is, what is exactly going on? I think if I look at it from a geopolitical perspective, there's incredible uncertainty and fear. We don't know what that's going to do to our lives. We're worried about inflation. We're worried about costs. But then again, we've come out of an unprecedented reality of COVID. How would you describe what you're seeing right now at an EU level, and what would your definition be of the state of tourism right now?
Well, the truth is that people love to travel. And COVID was a huge interruption. 2019, for many countries, was really the top historical records of people traveling and spending. And they never thought about safety in that kind of way. Of course, safety for their family, so they will choose quality. Actually, my country, Greece, is a very beautiful, safe country, and the Polynesian of Europe. Yeah. So 2018 break all the records, and I'm so proud because I used to be a minister at that time with our strategy, and also a very good reputation for Greece. That is a country that can host a lot of different kinds of people, and they enjoy their vacation. But then COVID came and everything changed. So at that time, I was at the European Parliament, and the European Parliament took really very fast decisions. Yeah. And we make resolutions just to help the countries, not only the 27 member states, but measures for safety and the way that people should travel to feel safe and not afraid. And at the same time, the lockdown came. And the Commission delayed a little bit to take measures. So after COVID situation that each country lived in a different way, I think people suffocated. So this year was a year that they said, okay, we need to break free. Yeah. So, of course, they choose in a different way. I've seen, for example, the sea tourism to grow up because they take small yachts just for privacy to make sure that they're safe. It's not that expensive because the quality and the services are great. And also, they change the lifestyle and the traveling. They go more for sustainable tourism. Yeah. So I think each country should be ready now for the growth. I think this year was good, and maybe...
Despite the issues, we should be ready for the growth. Better. Okay. Minister Chana, it's really great to have you here.
Thank you.
I want to reflect back to this time last year, right? Do you remember what was going on in Africa as a whole? Because I have PTSD from that. South Africa does genomic testing, discovers the Omicron variant, travel bans slapped across African countries. No one wants to come to Africa, and African leaders stood up and said, you're going to destroy one of the most vital industries for economic growth, right? Tourism. And we were stuck in the middle of policy, global policy, and a very different reality on the ground on the continent. Reflecting back on what you went through last year versus what you're seeing now, please tell me you have good news for us.
Sure. So, taking the example of United Republic of Tanzania, whereby the population is 60 million, and tourism over there contributes around 17% in Tanzania mainland, and Zanzibar around 30%. Now, recently, we are having influx of tourists. During pandemic, it was slowing down.
Yeah.
Most of the airspaces were closed. But now, since we have standard operating procedures, vaccine is there,
Yeah.
we are explaining to each other how to manage issues of COVID. So it is now improving very
But
much.
it's not where it used to be pre-COVID, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's not?
as
Not
the
yet.
way it was, but it is now improving. If you go to Dar es Salaam, Zanzibar, and Arusha, these are our big cities with a lot of national parks around. We have 22 national parks in Tanzania, and 50% of the land in United Republic of Tanzania is forest, and out of that, 30% is preserved under the regulations. So recently, we have many tourists coming, and most of the hotels are almost like full. So the situation now is really, really improving. There is the so-called revenge tourism. People really prefer, and also they have different options. When a person is making one booking, they do plan B and plan C. If plan A fails, they have plan B and plan C. So the situation now is quite improving, and we really have to prepare ourselves because this is a very great opportunity. So where we are focusing now is all about infrastructure. Infrastructure from international airlines towards the local. We need places whereby tourists can go and land in national parks, roads. They must be accessible, but also the so-called quality. This is where we really need to focus.
I'm sorry, I think I heard you invite us to Zanzibar.
Absolutely.
Am I right?
Yes.
You have to go to Zanzibar. Whatever you do, you have to go to Zanzibar.
Exactly.
I'm sure that was a direct invite, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Just checking I didn't mishear you.
Right.
JD, great to have you with us. I want to talk about your company and what you're seeing, right? So Internova, one of the world's largest privately held services companies. So you're basically plugged into, you know, what the agencies are telling you. You get a macro perspective of what demand scenarios are playing out. Tell me, are we back? Are we where we need to be?
We are well on our way, I would say. I think that we're seeing more demand for travel advisors, which of course is good for us. I think with the complications of travel over the last couple of years, people are looking for expertise. That's worked well for us. I think that pricing is certainly back and perhaps even higher than it was in 2019. Transactions are not quite there. So that's on the leisure side. I think we focus more on the corporate side. We focus more on the small to medium-sized enterprise, which is recovering about at the same clip as leisure travel, which is surprising to most. I think large corporate is only back about 70%, but we are well on our way. It certainly would seem that COVID is a thing of the past, but we're still working our way through the challenges.
Yeah, I mean, could someone just tackle this? Because I'm still really thinking about how aggressive we were in the response to COVID. So with the testing, with the mask wearing, with the quarantining, with the travel bans that, again, I keep saying this because we shouldn't take it lightly, decimated so many seasons across the African continent, to where we are now, where I'm still the only person on the plane wearing a mask. By the way, I have to just completely be honest. This aggressive change, because it's from one end of the spectrum to almost like our behavior to the other end of the spectrum. Who would like to tackle that?
Well, I can jump in
Clayton,
real quick. I think what people want to know is where is recovery coming, how strong is it going to be, and how is COVID still impacting that? In our global survey of travelers, COVID is about number 5 in terms of concern when it comes to travel. Very quickly rising to the top now is price, reliability, and control. Travelers have felt like they've lost some control over the last year. The experience many had traveling globally was fraught at times. J.D. Power, the lowest rating in airport satisfaction in a decade. So people want control back to travel more than they're worried about COVID.
Because we were worried about getting stuck somewhere.
Reliability
right?
of
Every time you go on a
service.
plane, you're like, what if I get stuck?
Eleni, that's right, reliability of service. They want to know that amenities are open when they arrive. They want to know that service levels are sufficient to what they're paying. We know that going forward, price is going to be more important. If you set aside the affluent market, who will likely over-index travel generally by about 2 times, those left to travel are going to increasingly look for value and look for value chain because they overpaid in many cases coming out of COVID, the revenge travel that the minister talked about.
Yeah.
People were willing to pay a premium to travel and didn't get quite the experience they wanted. So I think coming back around to this next season, people are going to expect more for their money, and some are going to be looking for value. So if we want to extend the recovery, we're going to have to be thinking about those conditions.
Minister, yes.
Well, at the European Parliament, we saw that coming. And what we did, we proposed and we vote for a new European tourism strategy, because as you know, the 10% of the GDP of Europe is from tourism. So we said we need, first of all, a mechanism, a crisis mechanism, so like pandemic or extreme weather conditions or whatever, the tourism cannot face its country alone. Yeah. So we vote that, and also we insist, and this is the most critical, the workforce, because this year the tourism was going well, but you see the chaos that was happening in the airports,
yeah.
and were no, how can I say, expertise, because a lot of people, they left their job during pandemic because it's temporary normally in tourism, or the companies, they had to let them go. And this was a big issue. So we say, listen, the workforce is very important, the people, the service is very important, so they should be paid better. They should have better conditions, and the most important is the SMEs. The SMEs, they suffer a lot, yeah. And they need to survive. And in order to have the transmission as well for green and technology, how can I say, development, we need not to leave anybody behind. So this is very important.
And that's a really good point on the SMEs. Nicolas, great to have you with us. Hotelbeds, I think how many hotels do you have listed right now? 60,000 on your platform?
So what we have actually is that we connect 300,000 hotels.
300,000 hotels.
Almost 150 countries with 60,000 travel agencies, tour operators, wow. And airlines. So it's all about connecting the dots, actually.
Okay, so I want you to take me to what you saw during the pandemic, well, pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and what you're seeing now. Are the signs showing that we're on an upward trajectory?
So I think it has been explained very well just right now. I think the pace of recovery was just amazing. What yeah. we saw is that every time that a city, a region, a country was reopening, everywhere in the world, the curve would go up incredibly quickly. And even recently, I was in Asia, and when you were discussing, you could see that the numbers were going up big time. But at the same time, as you guys explained very well, the expectation from a consumer perspective are changing. And what we see that the friction that was described is not very well accepted anymore. Yeah. The appetite is there, that's what the numbers are showing, but we need to do better collectively.
So the airport friction that we saw, is that what you're
Airport friction, of yeah. course, all of the difficulties into traveling, the fact that we still have a lot of segments in our traveler experience, which creates friction, and this more and more would generate frustration that we have to deal with.
I think one of the biggest issues, and you know, we were alluding to it earlier, is the price point. I think right now with inflation, issue of discretionary spend, we're worried about sort of the global uncertainties, how that's going to feed into our own realities, versus now saying, well, we want to go back and travel. How much of an impact is that going to have in the travelers' sort of mind frame? And do you think that, again, we're going to be missing out on the lower end of the segment and the guys that were always sort of higher LSM, the corporate people, sort of business travel, that is where that's going to be sort of untouchable? What's your prognosis? JD, let's start with you.
So I think, I mean, I think the travelers are going to come back no matter what we say, right? So I think, I'm sorry, repeat the question. I was distracted.
Yeah, so the price point, how is that going to influence, you know, different segments right. of the market, yeah?
So I think that in normal times, a pending recession that we're looking at would normally curb discretionary spending. It may be a sample size of one, but it seems to be a relatively commonplace that a recession won't curb discretionary spending. I think it's more of travel's more of a necessity than it has been in the past, and so I think people will forego other discretionary spend in favor of travel.
And Nicolas, you wanted to add something?
Yes, we see that clearly. I mean, travel is now ranked much higher than it used to be.
On priority lists.
Yeah, on priority lists. It's amazing. Everywhere you go, you see that and hear that. The second comment, building on what JD was saying, is that prices are at the top. Wherever you go, from the flight perspective, from the hotel average daily rates, etc. But this doesn't seem to be so far a problem. And despite everything that we hear on macroeconomic uncertainties, we see that the appetite to travel in 23 should be at the same level or even higher.
What kind of price changes have you both seen? Dramatic increase?
Yeah, for instance, if I take the hotel's average daily rate, it has increased to a level which is higher than what we used to see in 2019, but it makes sense. Makes sense because you have less room available, you have more friction from a people employment perspective, etc. So the point is that you need to better sell.
Okay, Clayton, I want you to jump in here. What is the health of the American traveler right now?
I want to come back.
That
Let me
is
come
a
back
lot
to
revolves
price
around
really
like
quick.
the health, the American traveler.
Yeah, and I definitely
important.
want to talk about that as the American here. But I also want to come back to price for just a minute. We are seeing the recovery of two different travel economies. We are seeing the recovery of affluent travelers who will continue to pay high rates, who will continue to pay a premium. But in our last survey, 74% of households globally making under $250,000 US of household income will seek a discount before booking. That's double what it was a year ago. So price sensitivity, as I mentioned earlier, is very important. The American traveler. The American traveler traveled to Europe more than any other international destination last year. They forego a typical Caribbean destination, domestic long-haul US, and they went to Europe. And they went everywhere in Europe, with the exception of part of Eastern Europe when Ukraine, Russia started. We do not expect that same demand for Europe next summer. We still think it will be strong, but not as strong. So from our view, the US American traveler will domesticate a little bit more their travel habits. They will do long-haul US travel, high dollar, Hawaii. They will go to the Caribbean or Mexico, closer to home internationally, but they will not travel as far. That said, affluent American travelers who are international travelers will actually spend more and travel more. JD and I were talking about that earlier. We do expect that to happen for the American traveler. So that we're very bullish on the American travel market. I just think it's going to change.
That's encouraging to hear because, I mean, when I watch TV, it says something different about the health of the American consumer with the new inflationary scenario. Minister, I want to come to you. I think with we're looking at a war playing out in Ukraine. There's worries about, contagion into the rest of Europe. We're worried about the energy crisis there. But that opens a really interesting door, to say, Africa as a continent, destinations like Tanzania, very attractive right now, come and visit. How are you changing your narrative and messaging under the current global scenarios that are playing out?
Yeah, so number one, we have great opportunities in Africa. So far, we are in free continental trade area, and now we have also new products of tourism. For instance, MICE tourism is one of the new product of tourism, meetings, conferences. When people come for conference meeting, like this one in Saudi Arabia, it could be one of the product of all these tourism opportunities. So, taking the example of Africa now, we are all selling our destination also as a block. We have South African developing countries, East Africa community, but also AU. And we have great attractions in Africa. Taking the example of Tanzania, we are based in wildlife national parks. We call it safari. We have Indian Ocean, Mount Kilimanjaro. So I think Africa is also one of the destinations whereby now it's picking up so fast. And I can say that the doors are open, just as other places. We need to collaborate.
I think that's a really good point. And I want to ask you this, as a follow-up. The economic impact that tourism has in Africa, and Richard was talking about with his panel earlier that tourism basically should be seen as an essential sector. is astronomical in Africa, actually, because it's foreign exchange earnings, it has an impact on villages, it has an impact on the value chain across the board. Could you give us insight into that?
Sure.
To understand that when there are travel bans, for example, any kind of global risk factor, and Africa is collateral damage, it has an enormous impact. But when people are open to the idea of traveling, it can change the economic trajectory of entire towns and cities on the continent.
Well, I think it changes all over the world.
Yeah.
Because when we have tourists from the air flight operator, airlines, they get tickets, business class, people, they travel with their families, groups. So there's impact from airline. When they come out of the airline, airports, their Uber, taxis, they all get advantage. Hotels, lodges. But we say in Africa, even the farmers, those who are doing vegetables, women, youth, they are getting to be deployed in one way or another. Fruits sellers and those who are planting fruits and everything. So when there is a ban of traveling, I think it touches everyone. And that is where we say domestic tourism was one of the remedy during the pandemic. But also we said there was a need to put more emphasis on low season, because normally we have high season during summer and also we have low season. So now is the right time to say, okay, we don't need low and high season. Every season should be tourism season. Yeah. So sincerely, there was an impact when it was closed, but when it is open, great opportunities are there. But this impact was not only for Africa, I think it's all over the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Minister, I want you to jump in here, because when you were tourism minister in Greece, you were giving us some numbers, and I want you to share that with us, with the audience, that when you joined, I think Greece was experiencing 20 million visitors, right? And then by the time you left, that jumped up to 34 million. Was it as a result of your policies that you were able to implement to be able to expand on the seasons?
Well, this was the big target, to make sure that Greece will receive tourists not only the 3 hot months, June, July, August, because of course you cannot receive 34 million in 3 months. So we had to expand. So we did a strategy, 365 days a year, and I work very close with the regions and the private sector. It was very, very important to join forces. And we did it all together because we had value for money, quality, and also we helped a lot of new destinations in Greece to just show what they can offer. And because of the prices that I was listening before, the regions and the locations and the destinations that they will suffer this time because of the energy crisis are the winter destinations, because imagine how much they have to spend just to make sure that the hotels and the family business, they will be warm, the tourists will be satisfied. And also, they try to do their best thinking that has to continue to be 4-season destination each country. So for Greece, I'm very proud because, of course, it was not only the arrivals that the increase, was the income, the revenue was important for Greece at that time, because don't forget the big economic crisis that Greece had to face. So we brought more than 18 billion revenues by 2019, was the best year ever, broke all the records, but also the tourism was growing more than our economy. The growth of the economy in Europe 2019 was 2%, Greece growth economy 2%, and the tourism sector 6.7%, which is a huge. Actually, WTTC was the first to acknowledge by Gloria Guevara that now she's here strong pushing the initiative as GTC for sustainability. And we support her because of this great initiative, but also she can see the future. So when she did that, was a big surprise for everybody how a small country, Greece, did that. So this reputation follow us. So this year we did a great job. And me being in the parliament, all these best practices I'm just trying to implement, so the European Parliament to make sure that the legislation and the path that the Commission gave us by 2030.
Is there appetite in the European Parliament to implement legislation around tourism and travel?
Absolutely, and also we actually right now work very much on the sustainable and resilience, on thematic tourism. We work a lot of the quality, and also, as I said before, for us it's critical to make sure the workforce will be satisfied and the small, medium businesses, because it's the 90% of the sector. Of course, there are big hotels and luxury, but there is luxury also in small and medium family businesses that they have to survive and they have to have quality. So for the budget, EU, next generation EU, we propose 20% to go to tourism, travel and tourism, because travel is also the transportation. And I'm closing my statement by saying that it's very important to make sure that no one will be left behind. It's very important for the progress in this sector to go everywhere, horizontal.
Okay, we are going to run slightly over time, but I want to get closing statements from you. I'm not a pessimist. I do get anxiety when I see what's happening globally. I think we've all borne the brunt of, super high oil prices in around 2008, 2009. We know what that did to demand, right? It caused destruction. We've gone through multiple cycles. We've gone through COVID. And, most economists that I speak to are really worried about a global recession. They're really worried about inflation. They're saying that we haven't truly priced in the risks. It sounds like most of you are feeling optimistic about the trajectory. But always the proof is sort of in the numbers, right? It's quantifiable. If I had to say, look into your crystal ball, over the next year, what are the main trends that you are pricing in right now for yourselves, for your businesses? Clayton, let's start with you.
Global growth next year, China coming back eventually, which will buoy that growth. Again, very bullish about that. COVID not being a major issue. Commercial demand beginning to look more traditional in terms of commercial and leisure mix. And the airlines continue to be very profitable based on rate compression and continued scale of
Are we living in the same world?
Maybe not, but based on what travelers are telling us, based on what corporate travel planners are telling us, based on what travel agents are telling us, and based on what general travel policy tells us, that it's going to be a good year in 23 for travel.
Round of applause. As they say in this region, inshallah. I hope that actually comes to fruition. That's brilliant. Minister.
Yes, I think I can say we are not supposed to be scared of the pandemic, because when these things happen, it gives us more creativity and innovation. What are we supposed to do? This is the world. Anything can happen anytime. So I think it's the right time to keep on investing on travel and tourism for the better future. So it's the right time to keep on investing in all ideas, in all platforms, investments of travel and tourism. These things are there to happen. It might come again, it might not come. So we should not go back, we should not be scared. We need to be strong and together exchanging ideas. So we have to keep the pace, keep moving, because this is the sector which contributes more than 10% globally in our economy. You see, other places, 30%, 40%, there are countries whereby they do depend on tourism, and that's it. They're surrounded with water. Taking the example of Zanzibar, 30% of our GDP in Zanzibar, we depend on cruise tourism, issues of tourism and water, you see. So I think now is the right time to think outside the box. How are we preparing ourselves? If another wave comes, are we ready for that? So no going back, we move.
Are you pricing that in as an option? Do you think that there's another wave coming? Or is that a scenario that you're thinking about?
Not really, but it might happen, because as it was first wave, let's say 2018, you never know, after 10, 20 years, what will happen. So I think we need to be strong.
Don't give me anxiety.
On
No more waves, please. This is why I keep wearing my mask. Nicolas.
Well, building on what we've all been saying, I think the recovery is there. It's been faster than expected. some uncertainties on 23, but so far the numbers are pretty amazing. The difficulty that I see for this year and the coming years is that the bar is raising from a consumer, from a traveler perspective. Clayton explained that very well. It's price and rates, of course, but it's more than that. It's to make sure that we get into a frictionless travel. It's to be certain that at the same time we get the experience that we want, but also the sustainability, which we see a key factor of decision. And all of that being opportunities, by the way, people are ready to pay more to get what they want now, and that's a very clear point. On the other side, from an industry perspective, we have some pain points. I mean, it's hard to get the right people, and we need to make sure that we reinvent ourselves. It's about digitalization, it's about value proposition, customer experience, and that's something which is very important.
Yeah. And
achieving all of this in parallel is the difficulty that I see.
And the sustainability aspect, absolutely important as well. JD?
So I think pricing will hold steady according to our supplier partners. Transactions will continue to raise. I think that people are traveling more. They're traveling more often. They're going for longer, and they're spending more on each trip. You know, we haven't talked about capacity, and so I think that we haven't talked much about cruise lines. So cruise lines will finally be at full capacity next year, and that's certainly been a little bit of a difficulty for us. And so I think, you know, I think we're all relatively bullish. I think cautiously optimistic, I think, is probably the right term for it. But, you know, labor shortages also have been a major issue in service, and I think that will continue to develop and get better over time.
Brilliant, thank you. Minister.
Well, tourism is the driving force for all the other sectors. Restaurants, entertainment, supply chain, everything. So now we know how to travel. We have safety protocols. This year was a very good year. I think next year is going to be even better. People would love to travel. If they join forces, the public sector and the private sector, they can also have value for money, prices, and quality. People want to travel in a different way. They want to have experiences, but also they want to travel with safety. I know that the health infrastructure for many countries went up, so people feel not afraid anymore. And I think that the years to come, tourism will come back. And also don't forget about the people that they learn now to work and travel, the tourist nomads. So they go in places that they love to spend time and work at the same time. Such a place is my country, also Greece.
Yeah, it's a really a hot destination for that. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your insights. I hope when we meet again next year, I hope, Clayton, that all your predictions are exactly the way that you've set them out. Thank you very much to my panelists. A round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen.